Nobody wanted this cat, until my husband held him once. The shelter smelled of wet fur and desperation, a mix of hope and heartbreak clinging to the air. It was a small, underfunded place on the edge of town, the kind of spot you'd miss if you weren't looking for it. Rows of cages lined the walls, each holding a pair of eyes that followed you, pleading for a second glance. Dogs barked in the back, their voices hoarse from days of trying to be heard. But in the cat room, it was quieter, too quiet. That's where I first saw him. His name was scratched onto a faded card taped to the cage. Midnight. A black cat with a crooked tail and one ear that looked like it had been chewed up in a fight he didn't win. His fur was patchy, his eyes a dull yellow, like he'd given up on shining. He didn't meow or paw at the bars like the others. He just sat there, curled into himself, staring at the floor. The volunteer, a tired woman with graying hair, barely looked up when I asked about him. "That one's been here almost a year," she said, flipping through a clipboard. "Nobody wants him. Black cats, you know? Bad luck. Plus, he's not exactly a looker." I nodded, but something about Midnight tugged at me. Maybe it was the way he didn't try to sell himself, didn't beg for attention. He just existed, like he'd accepted his fate. I wasn't there to adopt, though. My husband, Jake, and I had agreed. No pets. Not with our long hours, not with the house we were still fixing up, not with the life we were trying to build. I was just there to drop off a bag of old towels for the shelter, but I couldn't stop glancing back at Midnight as I left. That night, I told Jake about him. We were sprawled on the couch, half watching some true crime show, the kind where you know the ending before it starts. Jake was nursing a beer, his work boots still on, dust from the construction site clinging to his jeans. He wasn't a soft guy, not in the way people expect. He was practical, grounded, the kind of man who fixed things: leaky pipes, broken dreams. Me when I got too lost in my head. Pets, though. He'd always said they were a hassle. "A black cat named Midnight," he said, raising an eyebrow. "Sounds like a bet he's got fleas or something." "He's just sad," I said. "Like he knows nobody's coming for him." Jake snorted, but his eyes softened for a second. "You re-gone nah, make me feel bad for a cat I've never met." I didn't push it. Jake wasn't the type to be swayed by sob stories, and I wasn't sure I wanted the responsibility either. But Midnight's face stayed with me, those dull eyes haunting my dreams. Over the next week, I found myself driving by the shelter, telling myself I was just checking if he was still there. He always was. It was a Saturday when I finally dragged Jake along. The sky was gray, spitting rain, and he grumbled the whole way, saying he'd rather be fixing the garage door than traipsing through a shelter. But he came, because that's what Jake did. He showed up, even when he didn't want to. The cat room was the same, but Midnight looked worse. Thinner, maybe. Or just more defeated. The volunteer wasn't around, so we stood there, staring at the cages. The other cats meowed, rubbed against the bars, did their best to charm us. Midnight didn't move. "That's him?" Jake asked, nodding toward the cage. "Yeah," I said. "Told you, he's not much to look at." Jake crouched down, peering through the bars. "Hey, buddy," he said, his voice low, the one he used when he was trying to calm someone down. "Rough day." Midnight's head lifted, just a fraction. His eyes met Jake's, and for a second, I swear something passed between them. Jake reached out, sliding his fingers through the bars. I expected Midnight to hiss or shrink back. Black cats weren't supposed to be friendly, right? But he didn't. He uncurled himself, slow and stiff, and pressed his head against Jake's hand. "Huh," Jake said, almost to himself. "He's not so bad." I stood there, stunned. Jake, who'd spent years saying he didn't have time for pets, was petting a scruffy black cat like it was the most natural thing in the world. Midnight closed his eyes, leaning into Jake's touch, and for the first time, I saw a spark in him. Not much, but enough. "We're not taking him home," Jake said, standing up and wiping his hand on his jeans. "Just so we're clear." "Clear," I said, but I was smiling. We didn't talk about it on the drive home. Jake turned up the radio, some old rock song filling the silence. But I knew he was thinking about midnight, because I was too. Over the next few days, I caught him looking up black cat myths online, muttering about how stupid superstitions were. He asked me, casual as anything, if I'd checked on that cat lately. I hadn't, but I did the next day. Midnight was still there, still alone. It was 2 weeks later when Jake broke. We were eating dinner, takeout pizza, because neither of us felt like cooking. He set his slice down, looked at me, and said, "What if we just went and got him?" I blinked. "Midnight." "Yeah," he shrugged, like it was no big deal. "He's not doing anyone any good sitting in that cage." I didn't argue. The next morning, we were back at the shelter. The volunteer looked shocked when we said we wanted Midnight. "You sure?" she asked, glancing at his cage. "He's not exactly cuddly." "We're sure," Jake said, his voice firm. The paperwork was quick. The adoption fee, cheap. They gave us a cardboard carrier, and Midnight went in without a fight, like he knew this was his shot. When we got home, we set the carrier in the living room and opened the door. He didn't come out right away. Jake sat on the floor, cross-legged, and waited. I watched from the couch, holding my breath. "Come on, buddy," Jake said. "You're home." Midnight's head poked out, his eyes scanning the room. He stepped onto the carpet, hesitant, like he was waiting for someone to change their mind. Then he walked straight to Jake, climbed into his lap, and curled up. Jake froze, like he wasn't sure what to do with a cat that had just claimed him. Then he laughed, a low, warm sound I hadn't heard in a while. "Guess I'm his guy now," he said. And that was it. Midnight became our Zor. Really, Jake's. The cat followed him everywhere. If Jake was in the garage, Midnight was perched on a toolbox, watching him work. If Jake was on the couch, Midnight was sprawled across his chest, purring so loud you could hear it from the next room. Jake, who'd never wanted a pet, started buying cat toys, feather wands, laser pointers, a ridiculous scratching post shaped like a cactus. He'd grumble about the cost, but I caught him smiling every time Midnight pounced on something new. It wasn't all smooth. Midnight had trust issues. He'd flinch at loud noises, hide under the bed during thunderstorms. The first time I tried to pet him, he swatted at me, leaving a thin scratch on my hand. Jake was the only one he trusted, the only one who could pick him up without a fight. I wasn't jealous. Not exactly, but I wondered what Jake had that I didn't. Maybe it was the way he didn't push, didn't demand anything from Midnight. He just let him be. Over time, Midnight changed. His fur grew shinier, his eyes brighter. He started to play, chasing shadows across the floor, leaping onto windowsills to watch the birds outside. He even started warming up to me, letting me scratch behind his ears without bolting. But Jake was still his person. Every night, he'd curl up at Jake's feet like he was guarding him. People noticed the change in Jake, too. He'd always been steady, but now there was a softness to him, a lightness. He'd tell stories about Midnight at work, how the cat had stolen half his sandwich or knocked over a paint can in the garage. His buddies, big guys with calloused hands and no time for nonsense, started asking for updates. "How's that cat of yours?" They'd say, grinning like they knew something Jake didn't. The truth is, Midnight saved us as much as we saved him. Jake and I had been drifting, not in a big, dramatic way, but in the quiet way couples do when life gets heavy. Work, bills. The endless to-do list. It was easy to forget why we'd fallen in love. But Midnight gave us something to share, something to laugh about. We'd sit on the floor, tossing a toy mouse for him to chase, and it felt like we were us again. One night, about 6 months after we brought Midnight home, we got a call from the shelter. The volunteer, The one who'd been so skeptical wanted to know how he was doing. I put the phone on speaker, and Jake started talking, really talking. He told her about Midnight's favorite spot on the windowsill, how he'd learned to open the kitchen cabinet to steal treats, how he'd wake us up at 5 a.m. by batting at our faces. The volunteer laughed, then got quiet. "You gave him a life," she said. I didn't think anyone would. Jake looked at Midnight, who was sprawled across his lap, and said, "He gave us one, too." That's the thing about Midnight. It wasn't just a cat. He was proof that sometimes the things nobody wants, the broken, the overlooked, can change everything. All it took was one moment, one touch, one person willing to see him. And for us, that person was Jake. So here we are, a year later, with a cat who owns our house and our hearts. Jake's still not a pet guy, or so he says, but I catch him sneaking Midnight bits of chicken from his plate. Me. I'm just grateful I walked into that shelter. Grateful I saw those dull yellow eyes and didn't look away. Because Midnight wasn't just a cat nobody wanted. He was ours, waiting for us to figure it out.